Hello, and welcome to Resolve, an afterplay show. This is an after show for a role-playing game that does not have an actual play, where we tell you all the details of our game so you don't have to listen to it. I'm Sammie, I'll be your host, my pronouns are she, her, and I play Isiri Amoli, the mermaid. Joining me is my wonderful co-host, Alex.
Hi, I'm Alex. I use he, him pronouns. I play Moogle bounty hunter Smog, and his companion Juice both use he, him pronouns.
We are joined today by Dee.
Hello, I'm Dee. I use both she and they pronouns, and I play Geyser, who's a clown that you meet in your dreams, or nightmares, or both. You never know.
Hey, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us today. Now that we're all here, Alex, why don't you tell us about the actual play?
Previously, in EFFETE, a crowd gathers outside Pa's cabin. Isiri warns everyone not to fall asleep. Smog shoots Pa with the spell, slamming him into a wall to exorcise him. Isiri heals him with slime she produces. The townsfolk insist on entering the house. Tau and Athenos exit via a window to calm them down, while Geyser puts up defenses. Juice, Poni, and Smog track the ghost and leave the cabin. Dr. Acula flies into the house and transforms back to take care of Pa. Isiri explains the situation to him. Athenos and Tau learn that the society worships change rather than a deity. The people transform in childhood, and the beast is a lost, legendary aspect they're meant to balance. Smog notices Geyser's defenses attempting to hit an invisible target. Poni runs off as Geyser sets another glitter spell. Poni encounters a frog who changes into a man, Horsefly, who marvels at her. They move to his cabin to prepare for the beast hunt. Athenos sets up motion detectors similar to Geyser's. Everyone starts to feel tired, but Tau screeches to shake it off. Isiri proposes letting herself fall asleep. Because she does not sleep with her whole brain, she could describe a location for Smog to open a portal. Everyone feels a pull, similar to the transport, and Isiri and Tau notice objects on the ground telling them to go in. Tau gives into the pull and appears in a jungle with World of the Lost forming in his head.
So let's hop right on into our deep dive. Starting off, we were confronted with Pa still having his issues, and Smog immediately tries to take charge of that situation.
Well, not immediately. Everybody did a little bit of trying to figure out what was going on with him and was like muttering to each other about it. So Smog heard there's some presence and it's keeping him down. He's like, well, then it's a ghost and we have to exorcise him.
I like how that's the most logical conclusion that everyone has managed to draw here. I mean, there's clearly nothing physical occurring. Geyser's tried multiple times to at least isolate whatever this thing is and has failed each time. So, but the ghost thing isn't quite true either.
Yeah, probably not.
I couldn't imagine it being something that was entirely non-physical, because it seems like its ability to evade detection is speed rather than not existing to be caught.
Maybe it has some sort of physical presence, but it was triggering Geyser's flowers that she set out to do some squirt gun action. That's why Smog was like, hey, Athenos, put up these mushrooms that shoot out little spores. It doesn't hurt anybody, but it can tell us if something is near again.
Yeah, I definitely heard the, I don't trust Geyser to do it. Well, yeah. Dee the player heard it. Geyser did not.
But I didn't DM Dex about that. I was just like, Smog's gonna fly up to Athenos and whisper, I don't know if she can actually do this in a way that's not going to hurt people. I don't trust her to do it. So can you set something up that's similar?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's honestly pretty good thinking on Smog's behalf, because what Geyser set up was like a flower defense force that shoots hydraulically pressed water very violently and painfully. It's probably a little bit more manageable to have just an alert system than something that shoots everyone that walks near it.
I don't know how much use we'll actually get out of it, though. Cool that Smog noticed it and was like, okay, we can use this to set up more, but where we left off doesn't really lend itself to continuing to track down a ghost.
Yeah, probably not.
Because I think most of us resisted the pull. It's just Tau in the New World.
Well, it was just Isiri and Tau that got that feeling, right?
No. Everyone got it.
Yeah, everyone felt the pull.
Oh, okay.
It's just that Isiri and Tau noticed something that was at their feet, telling them to just give in, basically.
I was kind of confused. Well, we accomplished meeting people, but how are we going to fix the problem of them sleeping when we're in a new place again?
This is probably what Dan was implying was weird about this world. I feel like this is a sub-world.
I wonder if this is why one of the portals blew out, because this is supposed to be tangentially related, somehow connected world that is only supposed to be accessible from the other, and this is the more similar area of the two.
It's the stank. We gotta go to the swamp smell.
Love the stank.
Love the stank.
I think this time Geyser was also actually successful in causing issues. I thought it was also interesting that Poni just decided to take off. It's just glitter. Poni and Geyser kind of have an adversarial relationship at this point in the campaign, but I was thinking that Poni would want to be around magic. I'm up to my eyeballs in magic, because that seems to be her deal. She wants to do magic and get her horn back.
Yeah, you'd think the unicorn would be more interested in being around glitter, but I guess not. It's definitely a more competitive thing for them, so I can see how frustrated Poni might be to see guys who just go, oh look, glitter balloons and magical flowers, and then Poni's just like, I can barely purify water or summon plants or anything like that.
Yeah, I wasn't even thinking about it from the perspective of your two characters being rivals right now. I was just thinking about how Poni is so easily startled. Oh, there's something vaguely threatening. I need to run right now. But yeah, I think that probably factored in as well. Like, nobody trusts Geyser's magic because nobody trusts Geyser right now.
Correct.
That's good. That's the vibe we're going for. No trust, only violence.
Does that bother Geyser at all, or is it plans working as intended?
Geyser is actively not looking for people's trust, right? It would make pulling schemes off easier, but Geyser wants to be important in the wrong way. So as long as people are dedicating a significant amount of brain space to Geyser for a negative reason, Geyser is satisfied. She'll have to work harder for pulling off whatever capers or stunts requires, audience participation, but otherwise, pretty satisfying place to be.
Does she worry that not having people's trust is going to be an issue with sort of keeping them on the hook to keep getting those negative feelings out of them? Because, I don't know, she does seem to be in a pretty sweet situation right now where everybody needs to work together, but there could conceivably be situations where people slowly, softly snub her because of these sorts of interactions.
I'm not too concerned about the party ignoring Geyser because, again, Geyser's going to cause issues. As far as not being friends, at this point, that's not Geyser's goal. So if you don't want to talk to me other than when you have to, great. You are dedicating your time and energy into actively avoiding me because you know I'm going to cause issues.
Well, does that give you any concern as a player later on down the line that eventually the party just might be so fed up with Geyser's nonsense that they're gravely injured and then we won't offer help or, won't get them out of trouble or something along those lines?
Yes and no. I know it's going to cause issues. Maybe it causes issues in a way that the party will move away, and I get that. But it could also cause issues in a way that things are going to come to a head. Even if that's relatively soon, that's what I'm shooting for. I don't expect Geyser to be actively antagonistic to everybody the entire campaign. It's just this is how Geyser perceives the world right now.
Mm-hmm.
As they've been pulled into this new place, this new world. Geyser does have the capacity to care about people in a positive sense. They have just lost the ability right now to understand why that matters. So even if it ends up going the other way, where we're putting a damper on this whole relationship, that could be a turning point for them. Hey, I don't understand why this is happening, and how they interact with others, not giving them the results that they want, the power that they want, trying to get to a place where they're not also physically dependent on other people's negative feelings, but also, their mindset kind of maturing. Essentially, Geyser is middle-aged, but has no socialization whatsoever. Except for other imaginary friends. There's a lot of room for character growth with Geyser. We just have to see where that goes.
Something that this game pushes high dark playbooks to a lot is being ticking time bombs for the party, because Smog is in a very similar situation where if he keeps scheming with these interpersonal relationships, people are going to pin it back to him eventually. Geyser and Smog has a dark relationship with, because initially he saw her as a rival, being in that sort of relationship with the rest of the party, like being a time bomb. It's just that right now it's more on its face for Geyser, like eventually this is going to blow up, whereas for Smog it's more like eventually they're going to figure me out. they don't see me as annoying now, but they're going to figure out that I've planted the seeds eventually.
To be honest, like me, D, the player, probably would not have. Even if you told me, like, I'm trying to sow discord, to me, the actions you've taken have seemed really logical. In fact, I've only think you've spoken to other player characters against me, like against Geyser, not against D.
Important distinction.
I hate that bitch.
that's really gonna shake up the meta.
Even me as a person playing the character Geyser, I wasn't thinking Smog is deliberately trying to create animosity between me and the other players. I was thinking Smog doesn't want to run away from flower water guns anymore. He's tired a little bit. I think that we're going to get that slow burn for your arc, as long as you keep taking the very logical route. Sprinkle a little chaos here and there. Then maybe like later on down the line, when people start talking like, oh, Smog told me this, Smog told me that, then, you know, it might. But I see you flying under the radar for like a very long time.
Yeah, I think this tactic is working pretty well, because we've got Isiri having a bit of a conversation with Smog near the end.
Yeah, I think Isiri's caught on to a little bit of what Smog's doing. I just think she's kind of distracted by the confidence and like the gutso to just go ahead, make a plan and stick to it, whereas Isiri's a lot more flighty in that regard. So she's a bit awestruck in the sense of, oh, you're confident enough to like formulate something, go through with it, and see it out to this end. That's something I would like to put in myself right now. I don't think she's quite, like, she's probably senses it's at the like peripheral of her vision, like the darkness that's behind the mask there, but it's definitely not on the forefront of her mind right now. What did Smog think of that side of the conversation? Because Isiri kind of approached them with something a bit random.
Before Isiri told everybody that we shouldn't go to sleep, my plan, something that Smog might have been crunching on, was just going to sleep and then opening up a portal in the dream world, have everyone go through. Very similar ideas. I think it's going to be surprising to him that Isiri was willing to do something fairly similar. I don't think that completely changed his view on her yet. With the next session, there might be time for that relationship to change, because for him right now, it's a locked dark link, I think.
Yeah, my light's been accruing some locked dark links, which is very surprising to me.
I mean, she's very kind, but also does not have the same socialization as a lot of the other characters, so can be a bit hard to manage in social situations.
Yeah, she's a bit flighty. She can be temperamental a little bit in the moment, and she just kind of just says the first thing on her mind, and then like goes, oh, oops, I didn't mean to say that, and then tries to go back on it.
In that way, we have this parallel with Geyser and Isiri. We have the very sweet, well-intentioned, but just sort of used to speaking their mind homeschooler, and I've been homeschooled, so I know I can say whatever the hell I want, because it's not ever going to actually get me in trouble with someone I don't already know.
Yeah. I will say I'm a big fan of Isiri. Both D the player and Geyser the character are fans of Isiri. Me, because I just think like, oh, you sweet summer child. It's very like endearing, that baby deer energy that Isiri gives. And for Geyser, it's like, this is a person that is very reactive. Even if I don't trick them, I could cause problems.
Reactive is a really good word for that because, she's in the deep sea environment. You have to be reactive and aware of everything going on at the time, especially now that she was recently presented with this new role that she's never been entrenched into, or she never thought she was ever going to become, or she never aspired to it. Deer in headlight is definitely the energy I'm trying to throw off.
Yeah. Smog is probably the one most in his element. Everyone else is just kind of, oh, I guess we're doing this thing now. Actually, we want you to leave. Okay, now we're in this world. Oh, now we're getting pulled somewhere else. I don't know. Geyser does have one experience changing worlds, but it seems like Smog was the only one doing that on purpose.
Of this group, Smog and Juice are used to having the most personal autonomy. Athenos would probably like to think that as a god, he has the most, but he's also consigned to his role, beholden to the people that worship him in a way that's similar to what's going on with Tau, partially because they have the same playbooks. Whereas Smog and Juice are used to like hopping between worlds, do a job, get out. They're a little bit beholden to powerful forces, but only for a short while before they decide what else they want to do. There's a freedom with Smog, but it's a dangerous freedom. It's a dangerous, individualistic point of view.
Yeah, it certainly comes at the cost of fostering anything more long-term, especially because, you're leaving after a month, 2 months, even maybe perhaps even shorter once you finish your job and then head on out.
It's also incredibly physically violent, and it comes at the expense of other people. It's not just rejecting relationships, but actively harming other people.
I mean, you got that big gun. And you did shoot Pa in the face.
I am not subtle with what's going on with Smog.
Yeah.
It's just that it would appear that way to the other characters.
I like that Geyser is like, I'm going to cause problems. And then Smog is just actually causing problems. I really think bringing up personal autonomy was very interesting because that's not the way I was thinking about it at all. I was thinking about it mostly, in the literal, you have more experience doing this thing than we do. But that's a really great frame of reference because it seems like the other characters have major baggage that has not been addressed at all so far in this campaign.
It's not that Smog doesn't have that baggage, it's that being as free as he can be is how he deals with it.
I would like to address the baggage. Isiri's going to want to have like some deep chats with people once we calm down a little bit.
I'm trying to think of a situation in which Geyser would willingly open up to somebody. I think the closest maybe I've ever been would be to Susie, but I don't know how long the rest of the party are going to be in that world either. Or maybe we might be hopping in between like rapidly.
Because you've described Geyser as like Batman, Arkham, Gotham villain-esque, I think it would be funny if she did a very like Dark Knight Joker sort of, I keep telling you about my backstory and it doesn't really matter, but something traumatic must have happened because I keep on saying these traumatic things that seem slightly believable.
Like just out with it. I'm opening up to you with a gun to your head.
Or also like, I'm sharing my trauma not to relate to you, but to scare you even more about me. I think I could see Geyser doing that, at least initially, before like maybe actually opening up to someone.
I can see that too, but also I feel like scaring is kind of not, it's in the right ballpark, but not quite the vibe that I'm going for. I'm assuming that some people are like a little bit fearful of Geyser, and that's okay, but normal people run away from things that they fear. Running away isn't quite what I want. It's just like, fight back just a little. Get active, get angry. I want to light the fire. It's kind of like Athenos. I want people to feel confident and make decisive actions and feel good about themselves. And I'm here to help the puny mortals do that. And Geyser's like, I want to inspire deep, negative, lasting emotion. And I will inspire you to cause problems just like I do.
Which could be an interesting way to go, like, in the future, something to think about. Like, Geyser has the ability to make people feel and do things. If they ever wanted to make people unite a group, I feel like they're certainly charismatic enough to go to battle, inspire them to do well, or inspire sadness, or inspire anger, as you have been. There's a lot of ways that Geyser can use that skill to get people to feel how they want them to feel.
Yeah, and talking about Athenos, I was sort of thinking, like, why were Athenos and Tau the ones who wanted to talk to the whole big town and figuring out what was going on with their culture and stories about the beast? And it's like, oh, right, they are of the people. They exist to serve people. Of course, they need to, when they meet a new people group, understand what they believe and how best to help them, rather than other people's approach of, I'm going to focus on one specific person who I trust, or I'm going to go with this path that I already believe in. Yeah. It makes sense that Tau and Athenos were the ones who sat by the campfire and learned all about how these people grow up and eventually take hold of their power, and how they've sort of lost track of what the beast actually is, but they're supposed to keep it in check with something else.
Isiri wants to be that of the people sort of thing. I think she really likes the idea of that, but she's not quite mature enough to be ready. Like, when all the people trying to come and check on Paw at the cabin, she blocks the door because she's like, oh my god, I failed to wake him up. I'm too ashamed to let people see that I wasn't successful, so they can't come in here lest they berate me or make me feel already more inferior than I already do.
I hadn't thought of a long arc for Isiri yet, but I've been thinking more about where are we taking some of these characters as we've been going along. We talked a little bit about Geyser and Smog bringing things to a boil. We've talked specifically last time about Poni maybe becoming a nightmare if Smog has anything to say about it, or just getting her power and maybe not being happy with it as a possible eventual outcome. Based on what we're seeing right now, what do you think could happen with Isiri, with that desire to be more of the people?
I don't know. It's kind of almost too early to tell, right? Because she was just beginning training to become a priestess, which in essence makes her become of the people. She's a connection, a gateway to the gods, the abyss, and everything that elementally that means to her species. But it was, again, never something she wanted or desired of herself. So she has a very strong disconnect between the concept of her as a person and then her is what she's being trained and supposed to be. So she either needs to connect those two things and, like, step up to the plate and take the role that she was selected to fulfill, or she needs to completely disconnect. She's not quite on either of those choices yet. She's still sort of hovering in that call to action sort of phase.
That has to be especially disconcerting, being removed from the only environment you've known at that coming of age.
Yeah, she's not having a great time.
It has to be jarring for the psyche. Going back to the personal freedom topic, now that you're away from those people, mermaids, even though you want to get back, it's more like, I have decisions to make now that I would never fathom having to make. It has to be especially tiring. And I can empathize with Isiri being very skittish and being very flighty for that reason. It's decision fatigue. I don't want to have to think about these things. I didn't know I would have to think about these things. You had a whole life and career path laid out for you, a destiny in relation to your culture and people. Now I have to make decisions.
You're right. She is absolutely exhausted by that because she's constantly, like, not that everyone else in the party isn't learning about what everyone's got going on, because we all have a little bit of culture shock, I think. But I think Isiri has the strongest culture shock, and she's constantly learning about the people. She's constantly learning these social cues. She's constantly learning about surface world plants and animals and that stuff. When she connected to the change deity, they showed her images of every life cycle in the swamp. That's exhausting. To have, like, an encyclopedia just dumped into your brain like that. She has to interpret what all that means. So you're right, she is tired. She's doing her best to keep up her peppy little energy, but in that facade, she's crumbling a little bit and she's making mistakes, and now people aren't as confident with, like, trusting her, liking her because she's being so rash and flighty. It's going to be a big turning point whenever we get a chance to, like, calm down and she has a minute to just process everything. I think she might break.
Yeah, you keep saying things that make me think more about the relationships between our characters, because just saying that about Isiri made me understand better. Because Dan had reasons, I'm sure, for the pairings that he chose at the beginning of the game. And now I feel like I understand why Isiri and Poni were together as characters, because they have these very different ideas of destiny. And you have this, on one hand, Isiri facing destiny and seeming to be scared of it, reproachful, wanting to take it on, but not quite being ready for it. And then you have Poni, who does not actually have a destiny as far as reality is concerned, but it's running towards it full gallop.
Like, I kind of appreciate Poni's gusto and just like absolute hard-headed willingness to chase something that maybe wasn't theirs to begin with, but they will make it theirs, by golly.
They do seem very stubborn for things that seem obvious.
I love this session that we got to see a little bit of Poni one-on-one with an NPC after running off into the forest after trying to not get hit by glitter. Ran into this little frog and it was immediately like, I found my toad prince.
She certainly did.
I hadn't thought about Poni being very interested in romance, why she was immediately thinking about a frog prince, but I was like, oh, right, it's Shrek. And it's Shrek before any of the Shrek stuff happened. So there are just these stories out in the world about people transforming into what they were really meant to be when they have their first kiss, and that could involve like a sort of frog prince scenario. So of course there's this intermingling of the power that Poni wants and that sort of story of getting to your true self that she thinks she can attain.
Although in a previous session she did actually get a horn and then it kind of went away, which I thought was a bit cruel because it's like, oh, she finally got what she wanted and now no more.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what happens between Athenos and Poni. Eventually, Smog's going to need to pick another target to sow his seeds of chaos with. Athenos will be someone who's easy to sort of step into the more mentorship role with Poni, teaching her how to do magic when he can step aside a little bit.
Yeah, and I think Poni already has that admiration for Athenos because they gave them the taste of what Poni always wanted, which was 5 minutes with a unicorn horn.
I think that student-teacher relationship is very solidified with Smog and Poni right now, though, because she was instantly like, yes, I'm going to follow you when you tell me to look around for the ghost because Juice is going to sense it, and I'm going to keep on doing that searching with you until there's a threat and I have to run away.
All of our characters have things to learn from each other because even, Athenos, who's a literal god, Geyser immediately felt like, I have to rein this guy in. He's gonna do some damage. In a way that you described Isiri as like not as mature, so she's flighty. I think Athenos has had no reason to mature. It's very himbo energy, but also there's an undercurrent of, I know what's best for everyone, so I don't have to think about it. I just do.
Yeah, I don't know how much research into Greek mythology Dex did before making Athenos, but there is sort of, the gods are always as they are, and they're always been sort of larger-than-life allegories for human emotions and capabilities. So you're not supposed to relate or understand them. They're just supposed to be helpful if they want to be, annoying if they want to be, absolutely detrimental if they want to be. They're so very much assure in their decisions that it's always a concrete thing for them. They don't really, there is no second thought, like you said. So Athenos is definitely spot on with them. But I would like some downtime with them, not necessarily with Isiri, but just a scene with any of the characters where Athenos softens up a little bit and sort of breaks down what they've been going through, because so far we've never had that. We've had the entire veneer that, oh, I'm a god, yes, here, let me make clothes for you, let me change the world real quickly for you just out of convenience. But I'm sure Athenos has anxieties about their past history, though they've been trying to do with their trials, and now that they're here, they're not connected to the entire world they thought they knew. They thought the world was theirs, and now that's clearly not.
What's interesting to me about Athenos is that he is open with his issues and some traumas, but it's so fast. He has so much to say that it goes unnoticed because he immediately puts in something else that he's going to do. I think he opened up to the group of guards he was talking to about their fashion, about having to chase his sister off of killing the man he's in love with because he wants him to become a god. But it was just like a blip. and then he was back to messing with their clothes. What's going to be a challenge for Athenos is actually sitting and talking in those things instead of mentioning them in one sentence quickly in the middle of things so that you're aware but don't have to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's always a distraction or moving on to the next thing there.
Do you think that it's a way to avoid trauma? Or in Athenos' version of the world, things like being killed by your sister and then immediately resurrecting and then killing her would not cause trauma. That's the normal way of life. And dying, I guess, doesn't necessarily mean the end.
Yeah, I'm not sure, just because like we haven't had that time where he slows down and explains it a little bit more. Maybe he just views everything as an inevitability and his sister's wasting his time. Maybe it is really actually concerning that these things are going on. It also makes me wonder, with that idea of godhood being stable but also somehow unknowable, what does it look like for Athenos to change? What is the longer arc with him? Because we're used to tabletop role-playing game characters changing over the course of the game, especially like what happens if he gets enough experience to change playbook, or Phil's harm clock chooses to change playbook. What does a big fundamental change like that mean to a Greco-Roman god?
Usually from a historical background, let me insert my knowledge of mythology here. The perception of the god has changed from the people enough that they've taken on a new aspect or form. So in ancient Greek, they have epithets, for example. So Pallas Athena. Like Apollo is very infamous for having multiple aspects that he takes on depending on what he's doing or what's happening around him. So it could be that Athenos picks up an epithet and changes form slightly in a way that it's not entirely dependent on him, but dependent on how others perceive him.
There's plenty of room for that to happen, too, as he gets to know the party more, as he relies on them for that sort of perception. I could totally see a shift like that happening.
So we've learned a little bit more about what the beast is exactly when Tau and Athenos were talking to village folks. And it's more of like a primal aspect to their understanding of their transformation. So everybody in the society at some coming of age point is able to transform from a human form to an animal form. So Susie is both a person and a ladybug, but not at the same time, that they're one or the other. And the beast has been described to us as some sort of primal aspect, the like dark side of that balance. So it's not quite like a ghost or a spirit or something like that. It's definitely more primal, energistic. Do you think that's something this party is equipped to handle?
For Smog and Juice specifically, no. Especially if Smog knew what this is supposed to be. I've talked a little bit about this like after the session. Might actually side with it, especially if this is the more natural aspect, the more like attuned with being in the ecosystem nature of things, and is somehow working at a spiritual, possibly godly level. Smog might be like, well, this is an Esper, and I am supposed to make sure that there's a connection between people and Espers. I have to make sure I defend this thing. I can't have people harming it that can't help foster their relationship. I don't think he would really see it from the other end of things, like it is hurting them because of his own views on what people have done to nature in his world.
It's interesting that you say that, because I don't know if this information has been passed on to Isiri. I don't quite remember if we had like a group discussion about what the beast is in character. If Isiri gets that information, she would like to talk with it to see why and understand why it's doing what it's doing. I don't think she would fight it either, because it is part of the world. It's part of nature, as it will. It's not something for her to change. It's something for her to work with.
Geyser would probably fight because that's just her nature. I'm not sure how successful that would be. Geyser likes chaos, but Geyser wants to be the author of that chaos. If someone else is fucking up the vibes, she will probably try to put a stop to it. Ironically, be helpful for once. I don't think that would be a priority for Geyser either. Whether defending or like trying to stop the beast, Geyser would likely be on the other side. So against Isiri and Smog.
Yeah, well, that's exactly why Isiri proposed her bad idea to Smog, because she was like, all right, well, we need to know more about what it wants, what it's doing. Perhaps we can either appease it or find a way to help these people work in tandem so that this sleeping sickness or whatever it is not so bad or potent. If we understand it, can work with it, then maybe we can cure it by working with it rather than fighting against it. So that's why she's like, hey, Smog, enter my half-asleep brain.
Now that you bring all of that up, I think we never covered Geyser, like, literally antagonizing this thing. Just speaking into the air like, all right, come around, you're a coward.
Yeah, you pulled a Zach Bagans from Ghost Adventures.
Yeah, this thing seems to be listening to the entire group and responding when something eggs them on. Geyser is like, come fight, and then immediately felt cold and like had to make the campfire, burst out to feel some heat and sort of dispersed the group.
It was a lot because I'm not going to fight you, but I'm going to make you cold. I'm going to make you tired. And Geyser's just like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, fight me. Throw a punch. Stand here and fight like a man.
Yeah, it also responded to Smog talking about being able to open his dark portal with what Isiri wanted to do, because in Smog's mind, well, that would be the dream world, and that is probably where Esper's would normally be, but this is another world, so maybe I can do it. And then immediately at that is when everybody felt the tug at the end, and Tau actually went through. So it's been listening in. It seems like it wants to open the portal for us, maybe, but we weren't really up for that.
Tau and Isiri were both, tuned in a little bit more. And Tau received, a photo of their first incarnation as they were designed.
Mm-hmm.
On it was written, "Go in, you dummy." And then Isiri received a ammonite shell, and it was also written, "Go in, you dummy." Isiri can't read, so she did not follow those instructions. But Tau did, and Dan asked us something very potent before these things were presented to both Tau and Isiri, and it was, what is something that you've lost? I don't quite remember what Zach said for Tau, but I know Isiri said that she's lost her place and her way in the world.
Zach mentioned that Tau had lost different design aspects from the revision process, so that was sort of that representation of what they were originally conceived of before any edits.
Where they came from, and I think it's interesting that when Tau falls into the world of the lost, we're kind of now in this they are in this overgrown sort of jungle area, so I'm sure there's a double entendre here with lost. As you can imagine, being stuck in a thick rainforest, absolutely surrounded by trees taller than skyscrapers, and just not knowing which way is north or south, or where you're going or why you're there.
If this is the home of the beast, I also wonder if there's another aspect to this world of the lost, because we have this very rural but still village feel to it. So there's this nature surrounding it, but there are buildings. I wonder if there's another aspect to this world of the lost that is a giant confusing city that represents the concept of these people getting stuck in a more human form. Because I could totally see that as a juxtaposition to the jungle, but just as disorienting.
Maybe just to completely mirror itself, Tau's in the forest section that's surrounded by a giant city. It's like Central Park in New York, where you feel like, oh, this is really lovely and woodland, and then you turn over and there's Fifth Avenue.
So something that I didn't get to mention in the brief overview is that Tau immediately receives a message pinned to an arrow shot in the tree next to them.
That's right.
And it just says, "I guess you forgot this."
Which, what a potent way. Very threatening to send a message, right? The old medieval arrow on a note. That could be referring to anything that Tau's thinking of.
I wonder what Tau forgot. Was it the original form on the little Polaroid printout picture? Is there a more primal nature to Tau that they forgot? Because that's what Smog thinks is going on, is you were some primal force that got manipulated by people into being subservient to them, and that's why you think you have to perform. That would work very well for Smog, but I don't know if that's what's going on.
Again, I've only just dipped my my toe into programming for my most recent college course. But the thing, your prototype is very different from your final resolved form. So was there something lost in that initial shred of code that Hanabi P wrote into Tau that got slowly removed or replaced as each new iteration of Tau became more popular and more passed around in open source sort of space? Was that initial spark of inspiration gone?
It also must be really disconcerting to immediately after that hear that world voice forming words thing in your brain.
Mm-hmm.
So much sensory input.
You would think that of all of us, Tau would be used to it because in their world, they get loaded onto computers in multiples at a time. They're producing music for multiple authors at a time. I guess being a being of the internet is kind of different input-wise because it's actual code and it's not actual senses, although Tau has somehow become sentient. So I wonder how that affects Tau, or even just how Tau moves through the world.
I wonder how Tau views themselves. When everything about you is so malleable to the whims of whoever needs your puppet for their music video or your voice for their song or whatever, it's gotta be very jarring because they generally have that, dragon-esque sort of form, but it would not be very hard to mask the wings, mask the horn, and have them do like a ballad. It's certainly out of their traditional musical profile, but it's not without question. If you know what you're doing in one of these programs, then it wouldn't be hard. So it's going to be real jarring whenever they're used in such a way. Who are you if you're whatever somebody needs you to be?
Yeah, there's also just a weird sort of technical, sort of sci-fi level curiosity I have about what's going on with Tau, because inherently they're made up of programming and some sort of mystical forces. So what actually binds together their experiences? Is it like a her situation where they're cloud-based, so they have all the experiences all the time and they're very aware of talking to everyone? Is it more like the mystic energy sort of binds the codes that whenever someone downloads it, that's just like their personal expression coming back in the magic form to them, so they have this knowledge of it? How does Tau actually form on a fundamental level, regardless of how they think of themselves?
I don't know. It's such a hard question to really get a true answer to.
Yeah. And it's something that I love thinking about because I don't know too much about the other game that Tau is based on, but as far as Tokyo Mirage Sessions is concerned, there's not a clear answer to that. There are other beings made up completely of that force of thought, but Tiki, who is the sort of dragon Vocaloid character, it's not entirely clear how all of that sort of comes together for her. It's a weird space we get to explore with Tau.
Speaking of Tiki, I wonder if Dan is going to include any of our other background accessory characters in our campaign. I think that would be a little fun once the party kind of gets used to interacting with each other.
Yeah, I really hope so, because there's some weird characters in Isiri's backstory. Particularly, I think Smog would be very intrigued to know Isiri's sister. That gives a lot of avenue for us to explore our own personal baggage and sort of set it on the table when one of the people that may have caused it or either alleviates or contributes to it is sitting right there in front of you, either in a form we don't expect them, like if they take our characters and do a complete 180 with their backgrounds and how they're presented here. That would be interesting too.
I don't know how long of a game Dan is planning, but if he was working off of sort of what I built for interstitial stuff, this seems like it is a first round of worlds. And because of the concept of trying to hone in on getting closer to our world, I wouldn't be surprised if there is a second round where things are a little bit closer to how they feel in our homes. And that means there are some of the people that we recognize in different contexts before we can get all the way to home.
Yeah.
I'm not expecting too much of it in this first round of worlds unless Dan wants to pull a fast one on us. But I think maybe after we're done with getting to the centers of all these worlds and mapping things out and we get a fresh set, maybe we'll see some more of our backstory characters.
How close do you think we are to the center of this world?
Considering that we have a second world to explore, I think we're maybe a whole world of travel out. I would say probably like another 3 sessions at least, because this is going to be a twofer, hopefully.
The question is the center of this world in the world of spirit or the world of the lost? Or is that the same thing here?
I wouldn't be surprised if it's because these worlds are connected that it's one leads to the other, that we have to find one and that'll help us find the one and the other. But it seems like we're going to have to go through Lost first.
Mm-hmm. Lost on the island with the polar bear.
I wonder how Dan is going to handle getting the rest of the party, through that portal.
I have ideas, being the one who has the teleportation ability. My first thought was, well, it seems like some sort of magic or something similar to the teleportation grabbed onto us. We probably have some way of tracking that, which we can codify as a deep dive. Once we have that information, Smog can try to blast open a portal. The thing with Dark Portal is that it can open into a scene already in progress. It doesn't have to be a specific location. So there is another scene in progress, and Smog wants to get there.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So the answer is that Smog and Juice hold the power.
Which is a very, very dangerous precedent for us to be setting.
You don't want to rely on those two.
No. I wish Isiri would learn that she is capable of handling her powers. She just doesn't think she is. What is something that either you as a player or your character you wish had done differently in this session?
So I know this off the top of my head because it was something I was planning to do, but just didn't get to. And it's fine that it didn't happen this way. It's just that Smog had an idea of how to do things. So instead of Tau doing their metal scream to get everyone awake and not affected by whatever tiredness effect was going on, my plan was to have Smog shoot out a berserk at everyone, because in some Final Fantasy games that keeps you from getting afflicted with sleep, but it also makes you want to fight. Just fight every round, which I think would have been really funny, especially since we didn't have any targets immediately. So
just start beating each other.
we could have been beating each other up. Maybe Smog immediately opens a portal and then is like, all right, everybody, fight the beast.
What about you, Dee? What do you think Geyser would have done differently?
If I had thought about it, I probably would have taken more time to understand the beast versus directly antagonizing them. Even though Geyser probably would have antagonized them eventually anyway, the way she went about it wasn't necessarily helpful to understanding what was happening with the people. Geyser, if I had thought about it, would have... I think Geyser's uniquely primed to be a distraction. When the townspeople were knocking on the door, Geyser kind of put up a fight to get the townspeople away by covering the house in slime. But they could have literally started a fight and distracted everyone into focusing on Geyser away from the house instead of setting up Plants vs. Zombies style tower defense system that indiscriminately attacked people.
Yeah, I literally put a Plants vs. Zombies gif into the chat when that was happening.
So good.
Yeah. Which just so happens to be my favorite game ever. Unironically, Plants vs. Zombies is my favorite game.
Oh, yeah.
One, I love tower defense games. I'm obsessed with them. I don't know what it is about tower defense, but I'm hooked, injected directly in my veins. I also love everything zombies. So it's the tower defense in a game with zombies, and they have cute little plants. So I don't know, it's really fun. Even my pinned tweet right now is you're not a real gamer unless you play Plants vs. Zombies.
I play it at least once a year. I'll start a new save files.
Congrats, you are a real gamer.
Sweet. I'll add my gamer badge, please. As for what Isiri might do differently, I probably wouldn't have spent that downtime just with Dr. Acula, who was a doctor who was also a bat. Therefore, Dracula, but not a vampire. He was just a bat. But yeah, because not a lot came... I thought more would come out of that conversation, but Dan didn't really have a lot for me, which was a bit of a shame. I probably would have spent more time in the social circle with Athenos and Tau if I had thought otherwise.
To be fair to Dan, we willed Dr. Acula into existence because he mentioned that there was a doctor, and you decided to be that because of the voice that that Dan did for Dr. Acula was like this.
Terrible Transylvanian false accent. It's real bad. But yeah, probably would have had the Isiri be a little bit more social. But at the same time, she probably needed a mental break, so who knows? so let's get into the resolution phase, the segment of the show where we each get to say something about the game with no responses. So what is your final say on this session, D?
People are more sneaky than they seem. You can find me on Twitter at @BacksliderD. I am on PSN as IHadACowLOL. You can hit me up and we can play games. Also, I'm on Switch and we can exchange friend codes if you want to DM me. But don't quote my tweets to argue with me for no reason. Okay.
What about you, Alex?
Similarly to Nightmare arc that Smog is planning, I think he needs to have like a plan for everybody to have a nasty growth arc. So for Isiri, I think we're going to work on the Siren Song. You can find me on Twitter at ShiningCrowbat. I also recommend checking out the Xenoblade series of games. The main series 1, 2, and 3 and Torna are all on Switch right now. They are ridiculously large JRPGs that use MMO style mechanics. So you have positionals for your DPS, and you have tank and healer roles that have sort of their own things going on, but it is all completely single player. It uses weird parts of Judeo-Christian mythology as the basis of a lot of what's going on. And for those of you who enjoy such things, there are giant robots. I myself enjoy killing the giant robots.
And for myself, I think there's going to be a lot more exploration into each other's baggage going forward, which I'm very excited for. But I do think Isiri needs to show herself a little bit of grace. I think she's in her head right now, very caught up in like some gear of perfectionism and doing what she's supposed to be doing. But let's be real, she doesn't know what she's supposed to be doing right now. You can find me out in the wilderness, howling at a hollow moon. This has been Resolve, an afterplay show. You can find us online at most social media sites at ResolveAP.
Except Instagram, which is at ResolveAfterplay.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. You can buy the game we're playing, Interstitial, Our Hearts Intertwined, from its creator, Riley Hopkins, at linksmithgames.com.
All links will be in the description of the episode.
Thank you again for listening. We end our turn here, so now it's your turn. What's happening in your game?